Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Monday, September 15th, 2025, and today we're talking about those nerdy details of actually getting the winter-killed cover crops in the soil. Plus, we answer a question about, is it a good idea to plant one kind of berry to protect another kind of berry from birds? So let's do it. All right, happy Monday, everyone. We are officially midway into September. I hope you all had a nice and lovely weekend, whatever that might have been. Mine was weird. It was, as usual, a lot of soccer, and we are back to dry and hot as all get out here at the farm, so it also involved fiddling with irrigation a fair bit. But on the soccer side, fun story, we had multiple incidents this weekend of parents having to be told to leave the field because of how they were talking to refs. In one case, the game had to be fully canceled. Yeah. Rec league, youth soccer, the game had to be abandoned because a parent was yelling at a ref. I know I don't have to say this to any of my audience because you all are awesome, but just a quick PSA, please be nice to refs. There is literally a shortage of refs in this country because of how they are treated by parents and coaches. I've said this before. They're just there to enforce the rules, teach the game a little bit to the kids and keep the kids safe. So anyway, please thank the refs. Don't berate them. That's the moral of the story. Unrelated, don't forget to keep sending in your 20-second farm videos and theme song covers to farmermike@no-tillgrowers.com. Seeing your farms and or hearing those tunes truly makes my day every single time. You all are incredible. Love it. All right, with my youth sports rant out of the way and all that good stuff, just to reiterate and make us all feel like time is moving way too fast, we are officially midway into September, which means we are also at get those winter-killed cover crops in the ground if you happen to live in Central Kentucky Zone 6B time, which I recognize is oddly specific, but nonetheless, if you live in a similar region to me, it is time to get those winter cover crops growing. Now, in this first segment, I'm going to talk a bit about bed prep because sometimes you don't have to overthink it. If there is a crop in the bed you want a winter-killed cover crop in that itself is going to die, you don't have to completely remove that crop. But anyway, yes, in this segment, I'll talk a bit about the soil prep side. And then in the third segment, I'll talk a bit about, the different ways to actually physically get the crop in the ground. First, although I really want to emphasize the importance of good soil prep for cover crops, if you've managed the weeds halfway decently, prepping a bed for sowing winter-killed cover crops can be as easy as simply mowing it, raking it, and sowing it. Now, for example, if you're watching on YouTube, the bed I'm sowing in this little clip looks a little rough, but it was a bed of lettuce, which is a crop that will die over the winter here. I picked out any weeds that I saw. I mowed it really well, really close to the ground with my flail mower. I raked off what little residue was left, and then I sowed that to peas that I had soaked the night before, but more on that in the third segment. Now, some of the lettuce may come back, but so be it, because the lettuce, like the peas, will die in the cold. Now, if it had been, say, spinach or kale or something in that bed, I may not have been able to be so, lax about it. I would have had to have been more careful because those are two crops that would definitely come back. But if that crop had been, say, peppers, then same thing. Pick out the weeds, mow, sow, move on. All that said, if the soil is weedy or the soil is compacted or the bed did not perform well that year, it's worth taking your time to really prepare it well. Maybe broad fork it, but definitely prep it like you would for sowing basically anything, especially in the fall. Winter weeds like chickweed can wait until it gets pretty cold to germinate. So you have to make sure those beds are really well managed in the spring preceding this fall for those weed seeds. Because it's easy to grow a winter cover crop and then end up with a bunch of like chickweed and purple nettle and those sorts of things just kind of hidden in there. So you manage those in the spring before you sow these winter-killed cover crops, and or you manage them right now. You wait as long as you can, get them to germinate, cultivate them out, and then sow your cover crop. Like I said, it happens sometimes where a cover crop can also end up with some weeds mixed in, so that can just be a huge problem for many years to come if we don't kill those dang weeds well enough. Now, one way I managed the weeds this year is that I had some other beds that weren't in lettuce but were under tarps for the latter part of the summer. After a crop came out, I had mowed them and then tarped them. So I removed the tarp last week, raked any existing debris aside, and hand sowed the peas along with some teff for a trial, because I think that could also make a good winter-killed cover crop if it's planted early enough. Then I raked a little bit of soil on top, and then I raked the debris over top of that just to hold in some of that moisture. The idea being the seeds need to be beneath the soil and stay moist, but it doesn't always have to be sown with a seeder. Like, you can broadcast it over. top. It will work, but it does take a little extra consideration. Again, though, more on the actual sowing part in the third segment. One thing that comes up, though, do you need to fertilize cover crops like these? Well, no, not necessarily, but you also won't regret it if you do lightly fertilize them, and lightly being the operative word there. A really light layer of compost or some alfalfa meal, something simple like that, can give the cover crops a nice boost. But also the plants can, hang on to that fertility over the winter, turning it into, their own leaves, storing their nutrients and feeding the microbes for the next season. Not a necessity at all to fertilize cover crops. A good stand of cover crops are a great fertility addition on their own, but the better your cover crops do, the better your subsequent crop will do. So it doesn't hurt to treat them like a crop. So it feels like a waste, but like I said, it's just really feeding the microbes and managing the nutrients for you over the winter so they are more available for your plants next year. All right, I think that's it on the soil bed prep stuff for cover crops. Just make sure the bed is in the best shape it can be going into the sowing of the cover crop part of your season. How you cover crop is personal, but how it does will pretend how your cash crop will do next year. So it's worth taking your time to do it right. So even when I'm just mowing and sowing, I'm still making sure those beds are as clean as possible and as healthy as possible. Anyway, let me know what I missed, if anything, in the winter-killed cover crop bed prep story. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will talk about trap crops for birdies. Isn't there a book called Trap Crops for Birdies? I think that's right. BRB. Maybe I was thinking Flowers for Algernon or Bye Bye Birdie. It's hard to say what I was thinking.
Hey Jesse, this is Tommy Ryan from Canton, Georgia at Iron Mountain Organics. Right now we're going through and seeding some things for the fall. Things are kind of tuckering out here in the garden, but you can see I've got a couple rows here that I'm getting ready to plant in. We're gonna do some fennel, we're gonna do some pak choi, carrots, radishes, and some kale. And that's my garden.
Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Farmhand. Farmhand is the virtual assistant built for farmers, helping CSAs scale sales, run error-free fulfillment, and deliver 5-star service. Whether you're at 100 members or 1,000, Farmhand helps you grow without burning out. You've heard us and our farmers right here on Growers Daily. Explore farmer wins and learn more at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Charles Best, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. In anticipation of planting at least a quarter acre of strawberry/blueberry/raspberry/honeyberry, very fun, here in Zone 5B, I planted 40 ever-bearing mulberry trees about 100 yards from the market garden and will soon plant 20 serviceberry trees about 10 yards from it, all in hopes of reducing bird pressure on the small fruit, or at least of making deterrents like reflective tape more effective, given the birds can easily turn to the mulberry/serviceberry. But I was sobered to hear a farmer say that planting all those mulberry/serviceberry trees might simply attract a much larger number of berry-eating birds to the farm, which could ultimately increase, or at least do nothing to decrease, pressure on the strawberry/mulberry, etc. Is a berry farmer wise or unwise to plant alternative sources of berries for birds to feast upon? Does distance matter? Thank you," end quote. So this is a fun and interesting question. Thank you. And there is no perfect way of knowing what will happen in your climate with the existing populations of birds, etc. But I'll give you my best shot here. My guess here is that the farmer who told you that is probably making a bit of an assumption. With more fruit comes more fruit-eating birds. That makes sense, but sense doesn't always make science, right? And they may have experience with it, but it would especially be true in a monoculture system or a conventional system where you are not also focused on increasing the other ecology and other biology in your area. And sure, maybe that is true. Those crops may bring in more birds, but with more fruit-eating birds comes more bird-eating birds, such as the Cooper's hawk, among others. And with more birds also comes more pest predation. So maybe you lose some fruit to the birds, but you may also lose less to pests. In anticipation of the surge of birds, you can start doing a few things like building nest boxes for the beneficial birds, the pest-eating ones, like bluebirds, but also create habitats for the bird predators pollinators as well. One study out of Michigan showed that constructing nest boxes for the American kestrel inside of sweet cherry orchards resulted in a significantly lower number of fruit-eating birds. So perhaps something like that can help too. Also, perches for falcons and hawks have been shown to lend a hand here as well. Just look at your local bird predators and see what would be the sort of infrastructure to support them. Also consider more diversity in the plantings themselves to encourage several different species of birds and bugs. Low-lying stuff like shrubs, as well as taller trees, natural habitats, and perches. All of those may be of assistance. Diversity is health in all aspects of life, but especially farms and gardens. And in fact, more than any of the other bird deterrents, like the loud ones, creating a healthy ecosystem that supports all range of bird species is getting a lot more attention from researchers who see this as an effective and more affordable means to bird management than, say, netting. Anyway, I don't have any specific plant spacing or distances for you. I do think bringing flowers and such will help because more insects at least gives birds an alternative option to the fruit. Also, the net effect of birds can be hard to measure, i.e., even when they are eating the fruits, they are sometimes actually helping more than they are hurting. So more birds does not necessarily mean more fruit loss. So perhaps think of ways in which you can measure that in the same way you would measure, your own profit loss. For example, what is the average yield of blueberries or raspberries, etc. in your area? Even if you see birds in there, are those crops meeting your goals or exceeding that number? Because those numbers are constructed with some amount of bird predation in mind. They have to be. Have goals and just see if you can hit them. You may still have to adjust the production and habitat over time, but maybe start there. Anyway, hope I said something helpful. Berry and fruit growers, feel free to add your insight as well. Otherwise, we will take a quick break, and when we return, we will discuss the sowing of those cover crops, maybe with some microbes involved. Put our hair down a little bit. Be right back.
So I just thought this would be a cool opportunity to show why watering is really important. I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but I tend to water the edges of my beds a little more heavily just by how I do it, I guess. And this is a bed of carrots I sowed a little while back, and you can see the center germinated very poorly. So yeah, keep those direct sown seeds moist and water evenly.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
All right, so in the first segment, we talked about prepping for winter-killed cover crops. In this segment, let's just talk about getting those winter-killed cover crop seeds ready and then what to use to sow them. But I also want to discuss another side of the fertility coin as well, which is pre-soaking. I always pre-soak the winter-killed cover crops I sow for two reasons. First, it's a great opportunity to add a little microbiology to the mix by sowing them in a compost extract or tea. And second, they germinate faster if they've been soaked first. In general, that's just true of seeds. So I usually prepare a nice extract of compost by putting some compost into a cloth bag of some sort and squeezing it into some non-chlorinated water. Then I soak the seeds overnight and I strain the seeds in the morning. And if I don't plan to plant that day because maybe it started raining, which boy can dream. But if I can't plant that day, I'll dry them in trays, essentially priming them, which will allow the seeds to germinate faster when I do sow them. Otherwise, I can usually just go ahead and sow them directly into the soil, even if they are just a little bit wet, because things like peas, which are my main winter-killed cover crop, are large and heavy enough as far as seeds go that they do not clump together really. So a little moisture is usually fine. Then I will use my earthway to sow them, which works okay. The shoe on the bottom of the earthway that opens up the little tiny furrow for the seeds to go in can get caught on roots. So my preference is actually the Jang seeder with the double disc opener attachment, which kind of cuts a little furrow, but I lost my pea-size roller. So I use the jumbo plate on the earthway in a pinch. It's kind of a punishment maybe for me not being more on it about not losing my tools. It works fine fine so long as you don't fill the hopper too high. The Earthway does. You have to go slow when you sow it to make sure the seeds are coming out adequately. Now, alternatively to sowing with a seeder, you could dig a furrow, especially on a small scale, and then just sort of drop the seeds into the furrow and then cover that again. The idea is always to get good seed to soil contact and good moisture. Unless it's stupidly raining for like a week, peas and or oats or any other seeds really will not readily germinate right on the soil surface. So getting that soil over top and around them is key, and then irrigating if you have to. I've been enjoying that Sumi soaker for this, but whatever irrigation you can use, just make sure you get good bed coverage and the seeds stay moist. Sometimes if the bed is too trashy for a seeder, I will sow them right on the soil surface, but it's not my preference. If I do that, I like to rake them in a little bit and then press them down a little bit with like a bed roller or something equivalent. And then again, water them really well. Seed to soil contact, like I said, is the most important thing here. Most seeds, but especially peas, cannot just sit on the soil surface or they will dry out and not really produce anything for you, even if they've been pre-soaked or primed. Of course, a lot of these same ideas are applied for winter hardy cover crops. And if you are using, say, oats in your winter killed cover crop mix, then still soak it. It is also sometimes easier in that case to sow the grains, like the oats or whatever, on the soil surface and then run over that with the seeder to sow the peas. And then you're kind of effectively burying the peas and pressing the oats into the soil sort of simultaneously without having to use two different seed plates, i.e. one for the peas and one for the oats. Anyway, I think that's it on the sowing end of things. Let me know your thoughts, wishes, questions, variations, how you're going to help your refs, all the things. Otherwise, Monday is done. But before we go, we're going to get a quick word from our friends at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems. Whether you're growing tomatoes for market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a high tunnel protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality you need to grow productively year-round. The team of experts at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value from your greenhouse or high tunnel investment. Visit Rimmel.com today to get growing. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn more about how to do that in the show notes. Like if you're looking for an end of the year tax break, this may be a good opportunity. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Give us a review on Apple. Make it funny. I like funny ones. Do the funny ones. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at NoTillGrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Coffee, no coffee. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at NoTillGrowers.com to support our work. All the sales from my book at NoTillGrowers.com just go into making more of this content. That's the whole point. Keeping it free and open to the public. Also keeping it free and open to the public are our Patreon members. So big thank you to everyone over at Patreon.com/NoTillGrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of September, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Serge T. I had a friend named Serge. Last name was not T though. Bailey, Dan Jones, Sue Rowland, and Stephanie, Stephanie, I'm so sorry, Krolikowski. I feel like I nailed that one. All right, so this week's story is going to be about a referee. It's just like the theme, because referees deserve one, right? We call this referee's name is Daisy. Now, Daisy got into refereeing not because the pay, which certainly is pretty decent, actually. You can make a pretty good living being a referee, but because Daisy is a huge soccer nerd. And specifically, Daisy is a rules person. You know the type. You've met them. They need everything to be fair and equal, and they can become hard to play, schoolyard games with, because by the time they've established the rules of the game, recess is over. But that also made Daisy an exceptional referee. Not only was she fast and confident, she made great calls, taught the kids what they were doing wrong, all the things that you want out of a good referee. But Daisy also had a nemesis. This nemesis was Coach Rusty. Rusty didn't care what the call was. If it went against his team, it was the wrong call. Many times, Daisy, thought her head was going to explode when, for instance, one of Rusty's players would shove another player from behind. Daisy would call the foul, and Rusty would complain that it should have been called on the kid crying on the ground. But then one game day, Rusty didn't show up, didn't come to the game, and when Daisy asked his assistant coach, where was Rusty, his assistant coach said, "Oh, you didn't hear? Hear what? Well, that is for tomorrow on Mind the Whistle." That's almost too novelistic for the story. We'll find out, though. Thanks for watching and/or listening. We'll see you then. Bye.
Off the farm, ran right up, jumped in my arms. I said, "You're coming home."